Interviewing and the jobs of tomorrow. I'd like this to be an interactive discussion, though I do have a presentation as sort of a backbone for us to use. But everyone who is joining us this morning, my name is Martin McGovern. I'm the founder of Career Therapy. It's careertherapy.io. And we've got quite a bit of noise coming through from someone. We could just mute. That'd be great. So my name is Martin McGovern. I'm the founder and lead coach at careertherapy.io. I've used to work at companies like Udacity and General Assembly and all sorts of different companies that are helping people transition into tech. So I'm very excited to chat with you today. A little bit about myself. My background is in the marketing world, and I'm obsessed with understanding what makes people do what they do. I think behavioral marketing and all those things are fascinating. And I worked many years at Fortune 500 companies, helping them convince you to give them your money. And now I've reversed that situation so that you can convince companies to give you their money. And so it's a pretty fun process. I'm excited to get into it today with you all. I'm trying to see the gallery view here to see everyone, but we've got a lot of folks on the call this morning. So anything that we need to do before we jump in?
Go for it, sir.
All right, we'll just jump on in. So as folks are in the chat, feel free to share any questions you have. I'm going to do my best to monitor and call out anything that I see that is related. And I might pause and open it up for questions a few times throughout. So please feel free to share your questions in the chat. All right, here we go. So today we are talking about how to prepare for the interview. The interview is a pretty interesting thing, right? It tends to put people on guard. It tends to make people a bit nervous. When we are getting ready for it, it's sort of difficult to practice on our own, right? The typical way to do it is to Google some things, maybe think about it in your head, maybe practice in front of a mirror. But there's a lot of things that we can do to get ready for the interview that, to really set the stage for a great conversation, because that's really what it is at the end of the day. So you got the interview. Now what do you do? That's what we're going to be chatting about today. So, if you're going to get a job at IKEA, make a chair and take a seat. And we've already got some good questions coming in. So we've got how to start competitive coding for beginners. One thing to note as we get into today's discussion, I work with a lot of folks who are transitioning into tech, who are transitioning into data science, transitioning into web development, transitioning into UX design, different things like that. But I'm not a technical person myself, so I don't necessarily know how to do a technical challenge if you put one in front of me. But there's a lot of things that I've learned over the years of figuring out how to prepare yourself mentally and what they are looking for in order to be more convincing as you're doing those technical pieces. One thing in particular is that they're trying to see how you think, not just if you can get the right answer. So I've seen people who've gotten the wrong answer, but did a great job following up, still get the job. And I've seen people get the right answer, but they did it silently and they never really explained their thinking and they didn't get the job. And so there's a lot of things that we can talk about when it comes to the technical side of things. So there is the behavioral and the technical interview. These are the two types of interviews that we'll be seeing out there. And so as you can see, this guy all wrapped up, he's stressed out, he's worrying, and that's what we're really going to chat about today. How to get over that worry. So the first thing you want to remember when you're getting ready for an interview is that the hiring manager wants you to succeed. All right. The job search is a very difficult process for us, the job seeker, but hiring people is a very difficult process for a company. When a company is trying to hire people, they commit an incredible amount of time, money, and resources to the process of hiring. if you just think about someone's salary and then you break it down into an hourly rate, and then you look at how many people you're chatting with over a 3 4 month period while applying for a job, you can see just how much money they are investing in talking to you about this job. So you can see that they are actually spending thousands and thousands of dollars to chat with you about this job, which is why when we go through this process, we want to remember that they want us to succeed. They want to stop spending money on this hiring process. They want to stop taking time away from their day job, from the work that they need to get done. They want to get back to work and have help on the team getting things moving forward and getting things rolling. So they want you to succeed. When you sit down in that room and you have that weird power dynamic of this person sitting across from me and me sitting here and they're on a slightly higher chair, whatever it might be, we have to remember that they wish this was the last conversation they're going to have before saying, yes, hire this person. All right. And it's a very different mindset than what most people have going into an interview, which is they're trying to trick me. They want to trip me up in order to see if I'll fail. They are trying to catch me off guard. They're not. They're trying to understand if you have the ability and the understanding to communicate how to solve their problem. That's it. Can you solve their problem? Can you explain to them how you solve the problem? And then there you go. You've got yourself a fit. So how do we actually prepare for these things, right? It's not easy, right? You can't just pretend to go on an interview, although, if you work with a career coach, you can do a mock interview, which is probably the closest you can get, and it's really good. But there's a lot of things that you can do to get ready for the interview. One thing in particular is to do informational interviews. Now, these are not technically interviews. It's actually kind of funny. When I went on one of my first informational interviews back in college, I thought it was a real interview. I wore a suit and everything, and it all went very poorly. So informational interviews are much more about information gathering, research, building professional relationships. But the great thing about it is that when you do an informational interview, you're practicing how to talk about yourself. You're practicing how to talk about the industry. You're practicing how to talk about the technology. And you're practicing all sorts of different things that are going to get you more experience in talking for the actual interview. And that's something that people overlook in the technical interview all the time. In the technical interview, they are not just looking for the right answer. They are looking for you to explain to them what the problem is, what your proposed solution is, walk them through how you're solving it. If you get stuck, explain why you're stuck and what you would do to differently in the future, and then explain your solution. So when you're doing informational interviews, it gives you more chances to connect with people and practice talking about the technology and the job and the industry and really just practicing social skills, which are pretty tough to develop. Has anyone on the call been on an informational interview before, and how did it go? Because the big thing here is we don't want our very first sit-down conversation to be for our dream job. We want to go on some bad interviews. We want to go on some bad informational interviews. As a matter of fact, one of the strategies that exists out there is to try and get some interviews at some companies that aren't even what you want to do so that you can shake off the cobwebs, so to say, and get some experience and mess up with companies that are lower risk than the big ones that you want to work for. You don't want your first conversation, professional conversation, to be with, Google or something like that. So for those of you on the call, has anyone done an informational interview before? A coffee chat? Hit me up in the comments here. All right, we're getting a lot of no's. Interesting. Manish says, yes, it was one. Whoa, lost it. Yes, it was one time for a hotel tech company. It was weird at first. Absolutely, it's weird at first. All right, almost no one. I'm getting all no's. This is very interesting, and maybe it's a cultural thing. So, point out where I might be lacking in my awareness. Rohan says yes many times. How did it go for you, Rohan? What are some tips that you would share with the community? I think it's really important to hear from folks who have done it. Um, the key thing with an informational interview is that it's not about you, and it's not about getting the job. It's about building connections and expanding your professional network. So the key thing here is the wrong way to do an informational interview is to show up and say, "Hi, my name is Martin. Do you have a job for me?" If you ask someone that, they immediately get defensive and have a hard time helping. But if we say, "Hey, my name is Martin. I'm really curious about the work that you do and the company that you're at. Would you be willing to share some advice, insights, and just talk about your work?" That people are much more open. Now, again, there might be some cultural differences here that you need to be aware of and that you might need to adjust the conversation to fit. But from what I can see, there's a couple of folks who have tried it and seemed that, it's a little weird, but it goes better the more you do it. And I think this is one of those things where practice makes perfect, right? We're not going to crush it the first time we try to code a website. We're not going to crush it the first time we try to write an article for a blog post or something. We need to practice. We need to do it a lot. We need to get a lot of reps talking with people about professional skills so that when we get to the interview, it's not the first time we've ever talked to another human being about our work. Does that make sense to people? What other questions do you have about informational interviews before we move on to the next topic? Hit me up in the comments here in the group chat. Anand says, I've done a telephone interview. Telephone interviews are great. Was that like a screener for a job? How did the telephone interview go? The telephone one is really important, especially as we are sort of stuck in this quarantine state. A lot of companies are moving over to remote interviews. They already were moving in this direction for quite some time, but being able to talk on video and um, being able to have a conversation on the phone is incredibly important. Yes, it was your first time, so you were a little nervous. So one of the things that we can do to counteract those nerves is to practice on our own. We all have a computer sitting in front of us. Everyone's computer has the ability to record them through the computer. So one of the things we can do is download a list of of interview questions. Hit record on the computer and give the answers to the computer as though we were being asked those questions. It's kind of like the answer questions into a mirror technique, except that it records it so that you can watch it back. It's hard to analyze yourself answering questions while you're answering questions. So the best possible thing to do is to record yourself and then listen back to it or watch it back after the fact, either on your phone or on video, so that you can see and hear where you're not showing up your best. Is the way that the lighting is not perfect? Is the microphone not great? Are you not looking at the screen? Are you hunched over? Are you engaging? When you're answering questions, are you being clear or are you going on tangents? These are things that we find out when we listen back to a recording of ourselves that we wouldn't have found out otherwise. So we've got some telephone. All right, we've got some things here. So very cool. So we're all moving in the right direction. And what we need to do is be practicing. This informational interview piece is more about practice than anything else. You can practice at home with your video screen. You can practice with other people with informational interviews. And you can even reach out to a coach like me and do mock interviews, which is basically like the next step up, the more professional way to do it. And now the next thing is company research. How are you going to find out about this company? Where do people typically look for their company research? Those of you who are on the call. Obviously, the website is the first place you go, but where on the website are you looking for information? What are you trying to find out about the company when you're doing your research? What is one thing you're trying to find out about the company? Give me a shout in the comments here. Give me a shout in the chat. What is one thing you're trying to find out about the company when you're doing your research before an interview? How good the culture is. How is the culture? What else? Company values. What does the company do? Job profile. How much money does the company earn? Job description, revenue, job description, job profile, current working scenario, work culture and environment, growth factor, working environment, work culture, reviews on Glassdoor, growth factor. I love it. I love the engagement on this one. Thank you so much. Tier of the company. On LinkedIn, I can see their growth and everything. You must have a pro account. So work culture was the biggest thing that I saw in the comments here. And I want to call that out because work culture is not typically something you can find on their website. And it's also not something that is very helpful when you're trying to convince a company to give you a job. So, an interesting thing that I see happen when people are interviewing for jobs is at the end, when they say, "Do you have any questions for me?" They ask, "What's the culture like? What's the culture like? Is the culture of the company good? Are you going to give me a mentor?" And these are questions that are very selfish when it comes to the job search. And I don't mean selfish in like a moral way. I mean selfish in a, when you're talking to them, what are we focused on? Are we focused on solving their problems or our problems? Well, clearly you're trying to get a job, so you're focused on your own problems, right? But that's like, when we go out there and we just say, "Hey, do you have a job?" People they get taken. They're like, "No, I don't have a job. Go away." When we say, "Hey, do you know anyone who needs help with these problems?" They go, "Yeah, I know a few people that need help with those problems. Let me make an introduction." When we go in and we say, "What's the culture like?" Almost, especially in an interview, no one is going to say, "Oh, well, we're sitting here in an interview for a job and I work for the company and I'm currently on the company time being paid to interview you." At no point am I going to say our culture is terrible. Our culture is not good. Our culture is unhealthy and toxic. Don't work here. No one will ever say that. Similarly, their company website will not say, "Our company has a toxic culture. Our company is all about gossip and bickering." That's not going to be on their website. All you're going to find are the positives, right? And when you're doing research, it's good to know what their mission is. It's good to know what their values are. It's incredibly good to know where your values match theirs so that you can talk about that in an interview. However, if we are expecting to understand what this company is going to be like, that's not going to be where we find it. What we need to do is we need to find out culture questions by talking to people who work there. And we can't talk to people who work there and this is going back to the informational interviews. When you meet people at the company, if you meet them and you say, "What's the culture like at your company?" Again, they're going to say, "I don't know, it's fine." What we need to say instead is, "What are you most excited about in your job? What are you struggling the most with? What are the things you wish you were working on? What trends do you see impacting your industry?" Those are the things that are going to create good conversations, which will give you a sense of what the culture looks like. If this person seems incredibly unhappy and you do informational interviews with 3 or 4 people and they all seem irritable and unhappy, you can guess that the culture is bad. If you meet 3 to 4 people at the company and they're all very happy and positive, you
Sir,
can
can you
guess the
please repeat
culture is
that
good.
once again?
What's up?
Can you please repeat that once again? Because it's kind of, yeah, my
Yeah,
internet's not working properly. So yeah.
sure. Sorry. So if you are talking with someone and you ask them directly, "What's the culture like?" they're going to give you a positive answer and it's not going to be helpful. So what we want to say is, "What are you most excited about in your job? What are you struggling with in your job? What trends do you see impacting your industry, and what are you looking forward to? If the person's general demeanor is positive, you can guess that there's a positive culture. If they seem very negative or distraught or exhausted, you can guess that the company culture is negative. But you have to get that sort of in the questions, not asking directly. If I say, hey, are you a good person? Everyone's going to say I'm a good person, right? No one's going to say I'm a bad person, right? So we need to ask other questions to get that information. We can't just say, what's the culture like? So I just wanted to call that out. The other thing here is when you're doing company research, utilize YouTube and podcasts and things like that in order to find out information about the company. It's really great to start hearing opinions from the company leaders. So if you go to a podcast with an interview with the VP of marketing, you're going to learn a lot from what that person's saying. And what I like to do is sort of absorb, like a sponge, absorb the tone of the company. What are they saying? How are they saying it? What words are they using? And then try and repeat those words and phrases in the interview. And that gets us to the elevator pitch. What did they really want to know when they ask you the question? Tell me about yourself. What do you think? What are they asking you to say? What do they want to know about you when they say, tell me about yourself? Yes. So YouTubing a company and doing that research will only show their good side. So the YouTubing and everything like that. So looking at their website, checking out their values, all of that's important. I think what you guys were saying was important. It's just not going to give you an idea of what their culture is like. It's only going to give you an idea of the words that they use and things that you should say in an interview. The way to figure out what the culture is like is to go talk to real people. You're not going to figure out the culture really until you're working at the company. No matter what anyone tells you, it's not going to be a full explanation of what the culture is until you're literally in the job. And honestly, the culture changes day to day depending on hirings and firings and things like that. Culture is not a static thing, so it's just not a very helpful question to ask people. What can you do for the company? All right, so the elevator pitch. So in the elevator pitch, what are they asking? And people are saying, what can you do for the company? They're asking if I can get the job done. They're asking, why should you choose me? They're asking about your marketability. Is it fine to ask about the holidays? Like how many days off you get? Typically not. I mean, that's something that you get in the job offer, not in the interview. Whenever we're in the interview, we need to be asking informational or real interview. We need to ask some questions about them, about how we can be successful to them. So the best questions to ask at the end of an interview are, what would it look like? What does success look like 30, 60, and 90 days out? How often will there be manager check-ins and feedback so that I can make sure that I'm doing well in this role? What are the current employees who are doing well in this role doing that's different to make them stand out? What are the attributes you're looking in a new hire here so that I know exactly what I should be working on to prepare for this role? We want to be asking what we need to know in order to succeed, not what we need to know in order to take a day off around the holidays. If we start by saying, how many holidays do I get? They say, oh, wow, you just want this job so you can take time off, right? Now, when it comes to the elevator pitch, what are they really asking you when they say, tell me about yourself? What they're asking is, can you start this conversation? Most of the time when people are interviewing you, they don't really know what to say, right? They're not masters at interviewing. They Googled a bunch of questions, probably the same ones that you did. They have a list printed out in front of them. And the first question on every list is, tell me about yourself. So what they're really saying is, I'm not sure how to start this conversation. Can you start it for me? Right? And when they ask that, we can say, well, what do I need to tell them? What tone do I want to set for this conversation? And what someone said here, what can you do for the company? That's the most important one, right? So we want to state what problems we solve and then how we solve them. So there's a present, past, future way to do this. So I am someone who helps companies solve these problems. How I got to this point was my background doing X, Y, and Z. And now I'm excited to help your company solve these problems and continue to grow. So I solve these problems for companies. I'm able to solve these problems because of my background in these fields. And I'm excited to help your company solve these problems and continue to grow. That's the present, past, future approach to an elevator pitch. I'm just taking a look at the comments here real quick. When we tell them about ourselves, do we keep the job opening in mind? Yes, that's the present, past, future, right? We are presently helping companies with this problem, AKA this job. We do this job because of our background, and we're excited to help them solve these problems with this role. So for me as a coach, right, I work with schools and I help them with their student outcomes. I coach their students and get them jobs. So when I talk to a school, they say, tell me about yourself. And I say, hey, my name is Martin. I'm a career coach and the founder of Career Therapy. What I do is I help students manage the emotional and promotional sides of the job search in order to land jobs. I'm here because I started my career in marketing. It taught me about behavioral psychology. That led me into coaching. And what I'm really excited to do is learn more about your students and how I can help them out in their job search. What sort of problems are your students facing? So do you see how that answer gives them an idea of what I do, why I do it, and how I can help them while opening it up for a conversation about the problems that they're trying to solve? That's how we want to approach this. I'm taking a look at your comments here. So someone said repeat the last line. All right. So again, I'm introducing myself to a company. All right. They want to know what problems I solve, what I've done in the past to be able to solve these problems, and how I can solve these problems for them. So let's say I'm a web developer, right? I'm a web developer. So tell me about yourself. I'm a web developer. And what I do is I help companies build efficient code that sets them up for future scale, for the future and scale of their business. I got to this point because I started out my career being really interested in math and being really interested in science. I eventually went and got a computer science degree, and that led me into a career in web development. As a web developer, I'm excited for the opportunity to help you build new apps and improve your website in order to continue to scale your product to more people. What sort of things are you trying to build that you need a web developer for at this time? We can definitely talk about strengths and weaknesses, and we will get to that in just a minute. So that was an example, and obviously there's ways to refine that, but it's the present, past, future. I'm doing this right now. I do this because of my background in this, and I'm excited to help your business with it in the future. Okay. Personality questions. All right. This is the strengths and weaknesses. So someone just asked about strengths and weaknesses. Here we go. So when it comes to strengths and weaknesses, it's very difficult to really talk about that in a way that feels natural, right? What do you typically say right now for your strengths and weaknesses? Just give me your strengths right now. Start with the strengths. Hit me up in the comments. What are your strengths? Give me one strength in the comments here. Got discipline, team player, experienced, skills. Skills is a strength. Experience is a strength. What do you mean by that? Discipline is good. Capable of working as an individual as well as a team. Good temperament. Keen observation, communications, creativity. My strength is that when I start a job, I never leave it half done or undone. Persistence, good listener. Writing, team management, curiosity, communication, fast learning. We've got some good stuff in here. Curiosity. Now give me your weaknesses. What weakness would you say? We've got leadership skills, optimistic, presence, or hesitation. So a weakness is hesitation. A weakness is short-tempered. A weakness is that I find it hard to say no, punctuality, overthinking, bad leadership skills, competitive personality, public fear, time management, procrastination, talking too much, talking in too much detail about unrelated things, detail-oriented. Consistency is my weakness. So this is where it becomes very difficult to answer the strengths and weaknesses question, right? Because we know our weaknesses incredibly well. And we know our strengths similarly well. But we're embarrassed to talk about our strengths and nervous to talk about our weaknesses. So we end up talking about the wrong things. Now, people take this question very personally. They say, what is it that I am most weak at? I'm going to talk about that. And that's why we say things like procrastination. But honestly, is there anyone on the planet that doesn't procrastinate? The chances are no. Is there anyone on the planet that doesn't struggle with consistency? Chances are no. And if no one would say the opposite, then are you really saying anything? That's the question that I have. No one is going to say, you know, I never procrastinate, because it's impossible to say that, because everyone procrastinates on something. Now, someone here said, I'm very detail oriented. That's a good strength. It's a good strength because other people would say, I'm actually not a details person. I'm more big picture. When you talk about strengths and weaknesses, you want to talk about the parts of the job that you are going to be best at and worst at. And you want it to be related to this job, not your like self-worth. There's some more comments here. Irregular eating habits. See, like that one, irregular eating habits. That might be a weakness, but it has nothing to do with the job. If I were to say I have insomnia in a job interview, okay, that's a weakness, I guess, but it has nothing to do with the job. Biting my nails, also nothing to do with the job. What we are trying to do with the interview is instill confidence in the person we're talking to that we can get this problem solved. Social anxiety, again, we're listing off these very personal things that are unhelpful in a job interview, right? So let's go over to this website, 16personalities.com. What I like to do instead, can everyone see the 16personalities.com website here? Is it showing up? Yeah. What I like to do instead of trying to mine my inner insecurities to find answers to these questions is I like to outsource the answer to past managers and to personality tests. So rather than saying, well, I tend to procrastinate, which is an unhelpful answer, what we want to say is, in the past, what have managers said about me? Well, personally, my managers have told me that I'm not very detail oriented. I'm not very good at spreadsheets. I don't catch every misspelling. I'm not very detail oriented. So that's a weakness that I have. All right. I'm not very good at math. All right. I'm not good at data. Okay. These are things that I'm weak in that other people are strong in. When we're talking about strengths and weaknesses, we want to talk about something that someone else can fill as their strength. When you think about how a team gets put together, it's put together like puzzle pieces. Some people have strengths in some areas where other people are weak. And then people that are who have strengths in those areas are weak in other areas, where hopefully that's balanced out by the other side of the team. So when I'm on a team, I need to be on a team where you already have data people. You already have detail people. But those people who are great at details and great at data are maybe not so good at the emotional intelligence side of things. So what my strength is that I'm incredibly good at sitting with someone and talking about the most difficult parts of their lives and their job search. I'm able to sit with someone who's crying. I'm able to sit with someone who's going through a really hard time personally and professionally. Whereas other people, maybe more data focused people, wouldn't want to do that. So when we talk about our strengths and weaknesses, it's about showing a balance between the two sides rather than highlighting insecurities. So you go to this site and you take the test, all right? You take a look at my profile, all right? It's a 15-minute test, it's free. You go take it, all right? So I then take a look at my results. If it'll open here. For some reason, it's not. All right, what's going on here? Sorry, just a second. All right, it's being weird. Let me find my profile. All right, so we go to personality types. So you take a look at this page and you can see your type. So I'm an advocate here. I'm an INFJ according to this test. Now, this is not scientific, it's not perfect. All right. But if you scroll down, there's a piece right here that says strengths and weaknesses. And what you get to do is read this and either agree with it or disagree with it. If you agree with it, great, run with it. If you disagree with it, it's a little bit more of a analysis, but then you say, well, I disagree with it because of this, and that's why I'm able to do this. All right. So I look at this and I can say, one of my strengths is creativity. One of my strengths is insights. One of my strengths is being able to inspire and convince people. So to do presentations. One of my strengths is that I'm decisive, probably not one I would talk too much about in job search because it's just not concrete enough. Determined and passionate, altruistic. Sensitive, private, perfectionistic. Need to have a cause. Burn out easily. All right. So doing these things, taking these tests and then outsourcing the answers allows you to, in an interview, instead of saying my biggest insecurity is blank, what we can say is, according to my previous managers, here's where I'm strongest in my work, and here's where I need the most support. And I'm looking to help out teams that are deficient where I'm strong and that are strong where I'm deficient. All right. And then if we don't have past managers, we go to the personality test. According to my personality test, or according to the feedback that I've received, if you don't want to talk about personality tests, which is fair, you say, here's one of my strengths and here's one of my weaknesses and here's how they balance each other out. All right, back to our presentation here. So we have some questions here. Is it correct to say I've sometimes struggled to speak up in meetings? That is a personal weakness, not a team weakness. We need to talk about team weaknesses. Me not being strong at data isn't something that I'm going to develop. I have some baseline understanding of data and I can do what I can do, and that's all I need to focus on. When it comes to speaking up in meetings, that's a lifelong pursuit, something that you're working on, right? What they're really trying to see here is how self-aware are you and how much do you understand what this role is, right? When I talk to someone, I say, I'm not super strong at data, but I'm really good at emotional intelligence. I'm saying that because I know the job that I'm applying to is like 80% emotional intelligence, 20% data. So you want to be talking about the strength that you have that fulfills 80% of the job, and the weakness that you have, that's really the smallest piece of your job. So what you can say is, one of my weaknesses is public speaking, And if that's true, and that's 80% of the job, that's a terrible weakness to say. But if only 20% of your job is public speaking and you say, I'm a little nervous about public speaking, but it's something I'm working on, that's a perfectly fine thing to say, right? How do I decide which weaknesses I should tell so that I won't be rejected on the basis of my weakness? You don't want to say a weakness that is the primary part of the job. Look, I'm a career coach, so I talk with people on the phone all day, every day. If I got into an interview and I said, one of my weaknesses is that I don't really like being on the phone with people, they're going to say, how the heck are you going to do this job? Right? Thankfully, that's not true. It's not one of my weaknesses, right? Our weakness should be the part of the job that is least important. So data entry is the least important piece of my job, and it's also one of my weaknesses. So talking about how weak I am in data entry doesn't impact the interview because they don't care about my data entry skills. They care about my emotional intelligence skills. So actually, my lack of data entry highlights my strength in emotional intelligence. So when you're talking about these things, your weakness, it needs to be related to the job, just related to the smallest part of the job. So that's why I think the person who said, I have a trouble speaking up in meetings, don't say I have trouble speaking up in meetings. Say I struggle with public speaking, because public speaking, if you're a web developer, is the smallest part of your job, right? 80% of your job is building the website, 20% of it is sharing it out. And so you can say, I'm incredibly good at detail. I'm incredibly detail oriented. That's my strength, but I'm not very good at public speaking. So I build incredibly good websites that don't break, but then I hand it off to someone who's better at presenting it to the client, and they go give that presentation. See how the strengths and weaknesses try and balance each other out? Can I say that my weakness is that I try and hog all the work in a group project? I would likely say no, because we don't want to call ourselves a hog. And basically what you're saying is I don't work well with others. Does anyone want someone on their team who readily admits that they don't work well with others? If someone, and remember, put yourself in the other person's shoes. If you were the hiring manager and someone came to you and said, I don't work well with others, do you want them on your team of other people? Likely not, right? And this is where we get to telling stories, right? You want to be able to not just say what you've done, but give the answer in context. So very often someone will ask a question in an interview, right? Sorry, I'm trying to find the chat again here. There it is. So when you're in an interview and you say, there's a question here. Is stammering a weakness in an interview? No, not if you work through it and you're confident about it. If you have a stammer, stammers are not uncommon. What you need to do is probably preempt it and be like, I have a little bit of a stammer, but I just want to give you that up front so that you know that I stammer in interviews. And I'm really excited to chat with you today. I like to call things out so that people don't get caught off guard by it if it's something that we're worried about. Usually if we just call things out, people are okay with it. Stories, but then again, test it. If it doesn't work, if people don't respond well to it, again, I don't know the companies you're applying for and the situation, the cultural differences. So, I personally think that if you're confident, it's not an issue. If you think it's an issue, it becomes more of an issue. We want to tell stories over giving answers. One of the things that happens in an interview is someone says, hey, tell me about a time you struggled with a coworker. And our answer is, well, this one time I had a struggle with a coworker, but we resolved it and we moved on with our lives. We didn't give any details. We didn't say anything about who the person was, what the specific problem was, what the specific solution was, what the outcome was. We need to be specific. If you went and saw a movie about a bank heist and the whole movie was 5 minutes and they just said, this one time, these people robbed a bank at the end, you'd be like, hey, give me my money back, right? You want the details. How did they do it? What did they do? What was the plan? What problems came up? What was the solution? Who were the characters? You need to tell stories, not just give answers. I know I'm blowing through this one pretty quick, but it's important to remember. And this is what I was saying earlier. You want to record yourself answering these questions and listen back to your answers. You need to be able to hear yourself in order to be able to grow. We can't do this in our head. We need to say it, hear it, and go, I need to improve the story because it went on a tangent over there. And then you need to engage the interviewer. You want to ask questions of the interviewer. So when you're preparing for the interview, write down questions. And we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. What questions do you want to ask, right? So you should be asking questions about who are the highest performers on your team and what did they do differently to stand out? What is the what are the expectations of success in this role 30, 60, and 90 days out? What is something that I could start researching now to get me prepared for day one when I start in this role in order to succeed at the best of my ability? You want to be asking questions about your future success in this role. And then you, of course, you want to dress slightly better than what people are wearing at the company, right? You don't want to just wear jeans or something like that. So whatever their dress code is, dress slightly better than them. If it's an online thing, test your connection, test your lighting, test your microphone. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2, and make sure that everything is working properly. And then take care of yourself. Make sure you go to the bathroom and don't get caught off guard. You don't want to be sitting in back-to-back hour-long interviews, needing to go to the bathroom. And bring your notes with. It's okay to have a notebook with questions written down. Write down your notes. Write down the things you want to remember. Write down the questions you want to ask. These are helpful tools. When do you ask those questions during the informational interview? During the informational interview, the whole informational interview should be you asking questions. The informational interview is you in control and them answering your questions. You're in the hot seat, right? Or you're in the driver's seat. So informational interviews is you saying, hey, tell me about your work. Tell me about what you're excited about. Tell me about the industry. What advice do you have for someone who's trying to break in the field, et cetera, et cetera. In a real interview, it's them asking you questions. So you're the one giving responses. But when you give your response, you can also add a question in at the end. So like I said, when they said, tell me about yourself. Well, here's what I do. Here's my background. And I'm really excited to learn more about the problems that you're facing with your students and how I can help. What sort of things are you trying to do? Boom. Now they're in a conversation with me about answering questions rather than just me getting, because the typical thing in an interview is they ask a question, you answer, then it's silence. Then they ask a question, you answer, then it's silence. What we want to do is they ask a question, you answer, you ask a question, they answer, they ask another question, you answer, and now we're in a back and forth. But there's always going to be time at the end of the interview to ask more questions. They're going to say, hey, what questions do you have for me? And that's where we want to have 5 or 6 questions already written down, ready to go, so that we don't say, I don't have any questions. There's nothing worse than getting to the end of an interview and saying, I don't have any questions. It ends on a very bad foot. So you always want to have questions ready. How do you answer the very common question, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Uniquely. One of my favorite jokes ever is a comedian named Mitch Hedberg. And he's like, someone asked me, where do I see myself in 5 years? And I said, celebrating the 5-year anniversary of you asking me this question. How do you answer that question? I think the best way to answer that question, honestly, is like, it's more important to focus on the problems that you're going to solve than the job titles or anything else. So I would say, one of my main interests is trying to solve this kind of a problem for companies. And so in the next 5 years, I'm hoping that I will be working at a company in a senior position focused on building a team that is going to be solving these problems. Right? All right, now we've got time for questions. So please hit me with your questions in the comments. We got about 10 minutes, and I'm going to do my best to answer them. How exactly do you respond when you don't know how to answer a technical question? It's a very good question. So when we don't have an answer, we want to be asking ourselves, all right, if I don't know the answer, can I at least take a shot at answering it? If the answer is I really don't know, then we want to ask questions to clarify, to see if we can get a better question, right? So they say, here's a technical question. And we go, shoot, I don't know it. Instead of just saying, I don't know, and then just being quiet, that's weird. What we want to do is say, I'm not entirely sure. Could you provide more clarity in XYZ things? If they provide more clarity, and again, you still don't know, the best way to respond is to say, I'm actually not entirely sure what the answer to that question is. But I'm gonna go home and do some research on that tonight, and I'll shoot you an email with what I find. And that shows that you're going to be proactive in following up when you don't know the answers to things. And so I've seen people fail a technical interview, go home, redo the technical interview on their own that night, send it back with a thank you in the morning, and then get the job. They screwed up in the interview, but they fixed it in the follow-up. Does the interviewer assess us on the basis of the questions we ask at the end? The interviewer assesses us on everything. That's what an interview is. They are assessing how we dress, how we talk, what questions we ask, what questions we answer, how we answer it, and everything. Now that's intimidating, but that's what an interview is. So if you get to the end of an interview and you say, how much does this job pay? How many days off am I going to get? Do you give me a mentor? What's the stipend for my education? When can I go home at the end of the day? What are the hours? Can I work from home? Can I work remotely? What you're saying is, I don't care about this job. I just want all the things that I want. You sound selfish. We need, until they've given us an offer, and then we can negotiate all those other details. We want to be all about, how do I solve your problem? Not how do you solve mine? Almost every job seeker goes into an interview saying, hey, I have a problem. My problem is that I'm unemployed. Can you fix my problem? And the company says, I don't care that you're unemployed. We have a revenue issue or a website issue or a sales issue or whatever their issue is. Can you help us with our problem? And if you are saying, I don't care about your problem, just solve mine, they're going to say, well, I don't care about your problem. We're trying to solve ours. And they're not going to give you a job. We need to change that. We need to say, I'm here to solve your problem. In order to solve your problem, you're going to pay me a salary, and that's going to be great because that solves my problem. But I need to solve your problem before you can solve my problem. So we need to focus on them first. What is the difference between a technical and an HR interview? HR interviews are for the most part, behavioral based. So it's all the behavior questions like, tell me about yourself, strengths and weaknesses, things like that. And the technical interview is more about, here's some problems, some examples of the type of work that you're going to be doing. Can you do this? So for me, it would be like resume reviews or something like that. And so the thing is that there's always a little bit of behavioral in the technical, and there's always a little bit of technical in the behavioral. So you need to be ready to answer those questions no matter what interview you're going into. Why do you want this job? What should be the answer? Again, take the perspective of the problem that you're trying to solve. If we say, I want this job because I want money, what you're saying to them is that as soon as someone else offers me more money, I'm leaving, and you're going to be screwed. So what we need to say is, I want this job because this job allows me to work on this problem. And this problem is something that I'm interested in. You have a problem. I'm interested in solving it. You don't have anyone who can solve it. So let me do that for you. Of course, you have to pay me a salary to do that. So you want to focus on the problems you solve and how excited you are to solve those problems. I'm not a career coach because I want to get people's money. I'm a career coach because I take satisfaction in the fact that I can help someone overcome their anxieties and get jobs. Is there an online platform where I can practice for the interview? There's lots of online things, but I would just focus on, like, take your cell phone, hit audio record, and go download a list of questions from the muse.com or something like that. Just download any list of interview questions that's, comprehensive, and then practice at home in front of a camera or on your phone with the audio recorder. I get really nervous at package negotiations. Please provide some insights. When you say package negotiations, you mean like the job offer? The job offer, it's a nerve-wracking thing. Usually there's like $5,000 to $10,000 of wiggle room. You need to weigh all the options of your ability to walk away and a number of other things. We don't have a ton of time to go deep into negotiations here, but just remember that the amount of money they offer you is not a value of your self-worth. It is just their budget for that role. And so you need to have a candid and just calm conversation about what their budgets are, not about how much you deserve as an employee. I think when people start saying, I deserve more, that's when it goes wrong. What we need to do is be like, hey, I think your budget is too low. And then they go, that's all the budget we have. And then we say, okay, well, can you stretch it a little bit, 5,000? And they go, okay, we can find 5,000. And now you're having a conversation. You're not yelling at each other. How will the pandemic affect the upcoming placement scenarios? A lot of jobs are moving online. A lot of jobs are moving from full-time to contract. It's your responsibility as the job seeker to always be finding ways to help companies. Every single company, because of this pandemic, is struggling with growth or struggling with failures, to be honest, to use a blunt word. There is a huge economic impact of this quarantine on businesses. Any business that relies on physical locations is desperate to get online right now. And any company that's already online needs help scaling their services. So if you can help physical businesses get online or online businesses scale, you will have an unbelievable amount of work coming your way over the next 6 months to a year. If you think that this is going to stop jobs from happening and you're going to give up the job search because of that, yeah, you won't find anything because you've given up. But the people who see the opportunity, who understand that this is going to impact businesses in positive and negative ways and understand how they can be helpful, are the people that are going to find opportunities. And we don't ever want to disregard how painful this is in people's lives, which is why we're always trying to come at it from a how can I help perspective, not how can I take these people's money. That's not the goal. The goal is to help people so that their businesses don't fail, help people so that they can continue to scale without, their customers getting angry at them, help people build stronger businesses. If you can help people build stronger businesses and improve their ROI on your salary, you're in a great spot. And I know we're at time here and we have a lot of questions, but feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me Martin McGovern on LinkedIn. I go live every single morning from 8 to 9 a.m. Central Time, which is my time. I know it's different than yours. And I do a live stream. So bring any of these additional questions there, and I'm happy to continue to answer them live. All right.